I got my cloth, y'all, but I can't find my glasses. I think they're in the car, and the car's in the shop, so we're just gonna feel a little different this time. I still see fine. I might have a headache when this is all done. We're gonna make it happen. Speaking of things happening, there's something happening in American politics right now that should scare a lot of people, but maybe not the people watching this particular video. It should scare our ops, so to speak. Despite how ugly things are right now, and things are very much ugly, if you're looking at public sentiment in the last few years up to now, you'll notice that there are a lot of new trains of thought, or really I should say old trains of thought, returning to the public discourse or the public imagination for the first time in decades. The way people are talking about what we should expect from our government and our economy and how all these things should be organized, all of that is shifting. It's not a fever pitch, it's not fully saturated, it's definitely not perfect, but it is happening. One example of this comes from the story of a legitimate socialist running for mayor in New York. Buffalo, New York, back in 2021. You may have missed this because it was relatively niche at the time and it was at the height of the pandemic, but in Buffalo, New York, a black woman named India Walton ran as a Democratic socialist and won her primary race against a long-standing establishment candidate named Byron Brown, who had been entrenched in the role of mayor of that city for almost 20 years at that point. Like most major cities, the Democratic nominee race was the only real election that mattered, and by winning the nominee, India Walton was all but guaranteed to become the city's next mayor, or so it was thought. See, the Democratic Party, surprise, surprise, showed its true colors and its allegiance to power and the status quo by helping Byron Brown mount a massive independent campaign in Buffalo as a write-in candidate, even helping him mass-produce stamps to give out to voters that they could use to write his name in for mayor by just stamping the name on the page, which sounds illegal, but I don't know. Despite the fact that Brown had been mayor for going on 20 years and had seen the city decline in numerous ways that entire time, this was presented as a win for the people, but in reality, the Democratic establishment in New York just refused the people's will and did not get behind the candidate chosen for their party. Furthermore, Brown received significant support and donations from New York City Republicans that fueled him to victory. Hilariously, Brown would then abandon his role as mayor 2 years later after he accepted a role as a CEO of a horse betting organization or something in New York. That was one that definitely needed to happen for the people of Buffalo. I don't know too much about the city of Buffalo, nor do I know how the end result of that mayoral race affected local politics, but I know some folks that do.
Shout out to the Mamdanis. Shout out to all the socialist mayors. I do believe that if it wasn't for India Walton, I don't know if y'all be around. I'm just saying.
The way he did it was so insidious too. I'm not gonna lie. I think the stamps just killed me.
There is a part of Buffalo, we call it, it's south of Buffalo, South Buffalo, that is at the time, not necessarily now, but at the time, predominantly conservative, and still to this day predominantly white. And even though they didn't like the incumbent mayor Byron Brown, they really didn't like the black woman socialist. I worry less about Mamdani and worry more about his constituents. There's a part of me that also worries about people stopping here and feeling like you said, thinking that electoral politics is going to be what gets us out of our current situation, when in reality it's not. Politicians are always going to disappoint you.
Like a politician being a socialist is not going to do that for you. People, I think, I share Alia's sentiments of that worry of people giving up their, putting their hands up and being like, well, we did it. We got a socialist mayor. So there's something else that, we need to do.
I love how socialist mayor feels so pejorative. This is a great conversation that I had with these members of Lola. This whole conversation should be available by now on the Signify podcast channel. But I love how we use the term socialist mayor here in somewhat of a tongue-in-cheek way, both maybe with a tinge of hope, but also with an appropriate level of cynicism, I think, as we recognize that while it's good that figures like India Walton, or maybe more significantly, Brandon Johnson in Chicago, make strides to reintroduce socialism to American politics, that fundamentally electoral politics as a whole is a limited use tool for the goals of liberation for Black people and Americans and the world in general. On one end, as I alluded to earlier, having the concept of socialism not just be reintroduced to the American public consciousness, but also get legitimate political wins is a good thing and speaks to a spark that the American left has not had since the 70s. However, there's a reason why it's been so long since leftist political ideals have been taken seriously in the mainstream. The deck has not just been stacked, but meticulously manipulated for 50 years to not allow this type of wave that we're currently in to happen. And more importantly, we have to be able to recognize that this wave is just that. It is not radical or revolutionary or promised to sustain. It's just the energy of the moment. And it's important to keep that perspective regardless of how our desires to take a victory lap make us feel. Because I've seen all of this before, and I know how this story ends depending on the decisions and trajectories we take right now. And this brings me to one Zohran Mamdani, the current premier leader of the Communist Republic of New York City, or if you want to be more normal about things, the mayor-elect of New York City. Recently, Mamdani made history by becoming one of the youngest and maybe I think the first ever Muslim mayor of the country's richest, most populous, and most important city. He has immediately thrust himself onto the big stage of politics, becoming a powerful figure in the Democratic Party, and he comes into that position with a ton of fanfare, goodwill, and hope.
Real good? What are you doing in my falafel?
And the last time I've seen something like this was in 2008 with Barack Obama. This is something I tried to talk about a few months ago, but everyone got mad at me about it. I saw folks say that Obama was always a fake leftist and that no one with any real sense ever thought he was going to fundamentally change American politics, etc., etc. But Mamdani, he's the real deal. Zohran Mamdani is going to be the change that this country has been looking for, ushering in the leftist utopia that will see us finally make improvements for America's working class, become a champion of affordability, address the police state in New York City, and completely divest from the Zionist entity in the Middle East, along with every other aspect of our American imperial apparatus that's going to be fixed once he becomes our new leader. Sadly, as I predicted, the belief that he was going to be our new leftist god didn't quite ring true. I could say I told you so. I did tell you so. Listen to your elders. Listen. That's the end of the video. I want to be clear though, when I was developing this take early, it was never to outright say Mamdani is going to be just as bad as Obama in terms of disappointing the people that support him. My goal more so was to engage with how the people were getting energized and remind everyone that we can't put all of our faith and hope into any politician, no matter how based or how good their politics seem to be. And as Mamdani has shown that he is first and foremost a politician, my goal still is not to just simply point and say Mamdani is bad actually, but to remind people that regardless of how good or bad Mamdani's politics are, it's our work and our energy that we put into him that is the actual real value and real lesson that we need to be paying attention to. But now that Mamdani's actually won and I got that bit of shade out the way, we can stop crafting a narrative around Mamdani that he is our Marxist-Leninist brown king by way of Africa and say that regardless of his many flaws that we'll get to, Mamdani good actually. There's some serious criticism to engage with around Mamdani that I will get to in a moment. But what I really want to do here is try to model a type of pluralism. Try to show that you can embody two truths at once, something that so many of us active online refuse to see as possible. Ironically, for the left, we struggle mightily with non-binary thinking. And we also have a rather causal mentality on whether or not someone's political project is of any use or value to the people as a whole. And on the flip side, many of us can't take it when our faves are criticized. Even with the most good faith and legitimate criticism, it's met with the energy of a K-pop fan arguing with one of the barbs. I'm inclined to believe that somewhere in there is a man who had a degree in black studies and read all the same shit I've read, who was far more sincere than Barack Obama ever was with his leftist ideal. But I also know at some point that Zohran Mamdani and Barack Obama had at least two conversations, and that regardless of how I and others want to imagine Zohran Mamdani, he is still a literal card-carrying member of the Democratic Party at this point. So, and regardless of the fact that Democrats aren't as bad as Republicans, they're still very, very, very bad. And anyone who is a member of their crew is inherently an op. Those are both true things, seemingly opposing each other, but yet existing all at once. I wish I could believe in a more simple take on Mamdani, but if anything, him being a complex figure gives us the opportunity to do something important in this video. to not oversimplify what he represents in our political reality. This is a high-stakes 7D chess game of political intrigue right now, and there's too much going on to feel too comfortable in an overtly simplistic understanding of Mamdani, his political wave, and whatever might happen next. So with that in mind, I went and found some folks that I felt had varying perspectives on Zohran Mamdani, folks that are his detractors, folks that are his supporters, and those with stakes in the game. In doing so, I hope that this video helps everyone develop as room temperature and balance a take on Mamdani as possible. Not because he's so good and that there's nothing to worry about, not because he's so bad and we should all revolt, but because our job in the equation is to resist stan culture and anti-fan culture and teach and learn how to grow for the moment, plan what people should be focused on next, and further our political goals. So we're going to take a nice, relaxing, easygoing look at this story. I'm going to skip the old school hip hop and the trap beats, and we're going to do some like jazz rap and some lo-fi as we start to discuss our left-wing chosen one, the Marxist Quetzalcoatl cataract from Uganda, Zohran Mamdani.
Turn the volume up!
This is a Brooklyn-bound 2.
It always seems impossible until it is done.
I know some niggas on the skate on Supreme shit. I know some niggas at the door with the remix. I know niggas got two bodies, still a teenager.
I'm so sorry for absolutely nothing!
Can't nobody fuck with me.
Furthermore, the name is Mamdani.
Keep 'em at 10 for that fuckery.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
So first, let's talk about all the things that lead us up to this point. I feel like I don't have to give a ton of intro to Mamdani at this point, but I do want to discuss the conditions that led to his seemingly unlikely outcome.
As I think about the energy that I've collected with my platform is how do I show people that it's hey, I understand that Mamdani's real cool. He was a really good presence, but what y'all need to take from this is that this election got won. He went from 1% to this because people were knocking doors. It was he got to there not just through memes. It's you all hold this power. And it's more so than investing this into and being wow, look at this magic Mamdani did. It's look at the fact that for this long of a period of time, for months, everyone was canvassing, everyone was doing this. You can do that not just about a guy, do this about the things you want to happen.
And it's because of that Black Studies degree. I just feel like you can't get that degree.
Stop.
I'm full of shit right now,
He's pulling your heartstrings already. Stop. Look, you're saying, oh, at least Obama waited till he, won. Zohran was doing it before he won. Difficult part of winning, the primary. I feel like that was a difficult part. That's the one where I was kind of is he going to be able to pull it off? Is he not? What does he start doing? He does the reverse Grand Platinum. He starts apologizing for actually being a leftist at some point, right? He goes on Fox News and starts groveling to the NYPD. And he says, oh no, I've privately, kissed their boots, but now I'm here to do it publicly. And to that level, I'm bro, you're acting if you haven't won the primary yet. Stop. Who are you catering to? What are you doing here? It's not for votes. So who is it for? And I do think that it's for, the establishment. I do think it's is to let people know, to signal to them, hey,
I'm here.
It's all for show. I'm here for you.
Zohran Mamdani is the current mayor-elect of New York City, becoming the youngest, first foreign-born, and first Muslim to ever be mayor of that city. This makes him unique as a mayor over any major city, but even more unique as the mayor as the biggest, richest city in the country, if not the world. That already makes him improbable, all things considered, but then you have to add on more. Before running, Mamdani was a relatively outspoken progressive, having made statements in the past about the criminality of the New York City police. He criticized Israel, calling it an apartheid state and saying that it was committing a genocide. He has a degree in Africana Studies, which he says had a deep influence on him, which makes sense because his father is a professor of Africana Studies, which also makes sense of his middle name, Kwame, referencing the Pan-Africanist legend Kwame Nkrumah, the former president of Ghana. I'm going to compare Mamdani to Obama for a lot of reasons, but here's one place where it's arguably going to be a stark difference. While Obama seemingly had a very cavalier and almost libertine background and indicates his engagement with leftist ideology was not very intrinsic to his worldview, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it was said at some point that he only read Marx to talk to girls about it.
This is what drives me wild about this, is that like what you're saying about like Obama, I tell you, I've been in rooms with like Democratic Party people who have been speaking about Mamdani, and they're like, he's a unique talent like Obama, and they view him like his energy.
You know, Obama made that call. Like, I'm so curious. I wish I was a fly in the wall.
Yeah. That call must have been, I think about, because he didn't endorse him, but he was like, if you need some advice, right here. Like, it's kind of like blows my mind.
Conversely, Mamdani has a better overall pedigree in radical thought, and in that regard seems like more of a true believer. How this plays out in governance and policy and the reality of the moment would be a much different subject altogether, but it's at least something to notice. With all that in mind, Mamdani was polling at less than 1% early on in the election cycle in a crowded field where it seemed to everyone that establishment Dem candidate and former Governor Andrew Cuomo was the inevitable future mayor. Cuomo comes from a powerful New York political family. He was governor just a few years prior during COVID. His father was a governor in the 90s. His brother was a CNN correspondent. He had deep Democrat establishment ties, and 13 sexual misconduct cases, along with a scandal involving covering up the deaths of elderly during COVID that probably should have landed him in jail, but powerful people always play by different rules. Also, still have to talk about Eric Adams, since he was technically the incumbent mayor who eventually dropped out the race altogether. He is now, unsurprisingly, getting ready to join the Trump administration. So one thing to keep in mind is that Mamdani had a great opportunity once he got the ball rolling, considering who his competition was. While in some ways it's still highly improbable that a mayor with many of Mamdani's features would win, and we'll get to that later, it's also important to note that the situation was ripe for a populist spoiler like him to emerge. People were not excited for Cuomo, but he did represent stability from the establishment. The establishment sucks, but it's better than the nonsense the city experienced under Adams and the encroaching threat of Trumpism that Adams invited into the city. However, early on, Mamdani's affordability platform, his progressive inclinations, and his natural charisma set him apart, and he began to shine through and quickly became the front runner.
Habibi, could I get an egg and cheese on a roll with jalapeno?
One Zohran special coming up.
And this is again very similar to the rise of Obama. Obama won his federal Senate race in Chicago after his opponent dropped out due to a sex scandal himself. Here's some hilarious deep lore for non-Chicagoans who may not remember this story, but Obama's original opponent was this guy named Jack Ryan. Jack Ryan's ex is Jerry Ryan, aka the actress that played Seven of Nine on Star Trek Voyager. They had divorced years before he ran for office, but it came out during the campaign that one of the reasons for that divorce was that Jack was into being cuckolded, and he would take Jerry to sex clubs and pressure her to have sex with other men, to which she would always decline, but that didn't stop him from asking over and over and over again.
What further answer do you require? Or maybe some kind of justification for what you did? A little sense of guilt? Guilt is irrelevant.
This, of course, makes perfect sense if you actually understand Republicans and their sex practices, but it's not supposed to be out like that. So the Illinois Republicans replaced Jack Ryan with the OG of Republican Alan Keyes, who was destroyed by Obama to become one of only a few black senators in American history. But the similarities don't stop there. There's the exoticism of Mamdani's race and ethnic lineage, along with Obama's. Even their names give them this unique appeal to stereotypical liberals weaned on fetishistic identity politics. They were both highly charismatic, great speakers, charming smiles, have impressive wives that add a ton to their resources. It's a well-known thing at this point that Michelle Obama was the more talented and dynamic figure in that family, but Barack is the one that craved the power and attention. And Zohran Mamdani's wife, Rama Duwaji, played the back for most of his campaign. She's been getting a lot more attention since he's won, and she herself is a creative and illustrator, and the grapevine tells me that she was a guiding force behind this highly effective online campaign. Most significantly, though, is at least the veneer of progressive politics and left-wing populism that both Zohran and Obama ran on. When Obama ran for president, much like Zohran, his opponents were an establishment Dem with deep political ties and a moderate Republican in the general election. But also he was dealing with the specter of George Bush Jr., for whom time seems to want to rewrite history for, but please remember, George W. Bush was awful in so many ways. Do not let him recoup his image.
Mr. President, are you up there? Go away! Sir, there's a disaster in New Orleans. I'm reading Super Fudge.
So like Mamdani, Obama seemed like what the left was looking for at the time, but in retrospect, If we're honest, Obama's campaign was not the progressive populist wave that we were imagining in the moment. Obama ran on some populist positions, yes, such as figuring out free healthcare, ending wars, and fixing our financial systems. But overall, a lot like Mamdani, we'll get to this, he very much signaled a more moderate politics than we like to acknowledge in the moment because the vibes were so good that we didn't care. Obama on numerous occasions even compared himself to Ronald Reagan of all people. So that should have been an indication of how things would go. The main thing to consider about Obama as it pertains to Mamdani is that regardless of how he might have been perceived going into his presidency, Obama very quickly showed his cards once he was in. He very publicly filled his entire cabinet with establishment figures, people with significant ties to the financial industry, and lobbyists, along with any other type of narrative you can think of. More significantly is that he also very quietly killed the progressive elements of his coalition that got him to that point. In an interview I did with Maurice Mitchell of the Working Families Party, he spoke to how there were a lot of legitimate progressives and organizers who worked with Obama and felt like there was a possibility for progressive action in his presidency, but recognized almost immediately that Obama set things in motion to neutralize their power within his administration.
With Barack Obama, the thing that I want people to note is that I take in critiques and they're helpful to me. I think I offer critiques. I actually think it's healthy if you actually care about a political project, a political actor, that you provide them with critiques. So I'm not hating. I'm not hating on the Obamas. I'm not hating. Look, I felt that thing in my heart. I wanted him to be the organizer because I'm an organizer that was able to, achieve this status. But we should account for what happened, especially because there may be another opportunity for somebody else who has a relationship to our movement or another Black person to be in those positions. And we want them to build on good things and not make the same mistakes, right? He put in people like Rahm Emanuel, whose main job was to beat back the movement. Shut up, sit in your place.
Right.
We got it from here.
We got it. We got it. Thank you.
Are you a racist?
Right. Are you a racist? How dare you? Our nation's first Black president. How could you, right?
But to be fair to Obama, he was always very clear that he fundamentally believed in the American project and neoliberalism, and his presidency illustrated this signaling. We were in denial when he was running, and I think we are even more in denial about his presidency now. But the question is, should we expect a similar heel turn from Mamdani, whose sudden populist rise so closely mimics Obama's that Obama called him to offer him advice? But more importantly, not an endorsement. Let's track the same process with Mamdani. His first really viral moment was breaking with most of the field on Israel.
My belief in a universality in international law is also the same set of beliefs that have led me to describe what's happening in Gaza as a genocide.
New York has the largest population of Jewish citizens in the world outside of Israel, and thus the Jewish vote is an important aspect of any political campaign. And because he's a shill, we saw Cuomo jump out to immediately publicly fillet a country actively genociding people, and we saw Mamdani do his best to resist coming off anti-Israel so early in the contest. But also he was trying to be clear that he was not going to be another AIPAC-funded Democrat shill like almost all of them at this point. While the issue of Israel's genocide in Palestine is presented by the mainstream media and our government as a more complex issue, and indeed the full history of how we got here is complex, what's not actually that complex is what's currently happening and what's right and wrong. And more importantly, this is no longer a niche opinion, as the public perception of Israel and its genocide has for a while now been that they're committing a genocide with our government's protection and support. So most voters, both on the left and the right, are not in line with mainstream politicians like Cuomo. So Mamdani signaling to them a willingness to openly resist, which was and still is rare, was a good thing. However, while the viral moments in the highly social media driven campaign worked well, it needs to be understood that again, unlike Obama, Mamdani had a huge grassroots based movement of very young voters getting very active for him all over the city. And this is where I maybe ran afoul of some folks by showing a bit of skepticism, because Mamdani had a lot of young progressives in New York very excited about him and hopeful for his chances. This culminated in a dominant win with the Democratic primary in New York. However, when the results of that win were analyzed, Mamdani was shown to have actually significantly lost the Black vote in New York. Something that if it happened again might lead to him losing the general. However, this proved to just be another opportunity for Mamdani and his campaigners to show how talented they were, because by the time the final election results came in, Mamdani had considerably changed his outcome and the Black vote ended up being his most supportive base. Specifically, I want to point out Black men, because people swear to God that we're secret Trump voters and Republicans, and this has never been true. It is so untrue. I'm going to leave that alone for now. We'll touch on this some other time. I got several other videos talking about it. This switch up is for a few reasons. First, it's because of how Mamdani campaigned. And as I said in a B-Sides video a month ago, it was clear that Mamdani had seen the mistakes of similar campaigns such as Bernie Sanders's in 2016 and 2020 and made very explicit inroads with connecting with black voters.
Tonight I have an extra ticket to the Wu-Tang Clan concert at Madison Square Garden.
And likely because of his area of studies, his love for hip hop, and the fact that he's been living in New York, he did not come off nearly as cringe or posery as another figure might have under the circumstances.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming.
It's a real pleasure.
Wow.
It's a real pleasure.
At a Wu-Tang show.
But I think what it really comes down to is the fact that he ran on a platform of affordability and being focused on providing actual solutions to normal Americans, which is something that neither of the major parties seem to want to do these days. And lastly, it didn't help that Cuomo and to a lesser extent, Eric Adams both ran what amounts to racist fear-mongering campaigns where they spent more time calling Mamdani an anti-Semitic evil communist than presenting any type of attractive plan for what they were going to do for the city. The only thing they were banking on, much like Kamala Harris in the 2024 election, was maintenance of the status quo, which most people understood was awful. But this brings us to the more concerning areas that we need to talk about with Mamdani, how him being labeled and seen as this progressive figure is ultimately dangerous for real leftists and progressive movements, but at the same time is an opportunity we really can't pass up. Part 2, what should we expect from Mamdani? While Mamdani is a democratic socialist and has been smeared by mainstream media as a communist and some type of scary radical, and at the same time, a lot of leftists, especially more moderate leftists, have adopted Mamdani as a symbol of progress and a legitimate win for the actual left in this country and not the Democrat or liberal left. So oddly, what we have is two very different political factions saying almost the same thing about a politician, which is rare. Obama, Biden, and Kamala Harris were also smeared as too far left and communists, etc. But no halfway knowledgeable leftist looked at Biden, Obama, or Kamala as one of their own, which makes sense. But how sensible is it to claim Mamdani as a real leftist in the same circumstance? The fact is, Mamdani has done about as much as he can to distance himself from that label, and his policies, while progressive, aren't necessarily socialist policies. The sad reality is that Mamdani's platform and political goals seem radical and extreme in a country that's been ruled by neoliberal fascists for around 50 years. I love the memes where, socialism wins memes. Yeah. I love the memes, but I also have come to understand that memes are just, some people don't get the joke.
Yeah, part of the reason that I was writing so hard for was because New York City is one of the cities where it's okay, directly depending on who you put in as mayor, they have so much real power, and it's there's a very real impact to who gets in there. So I can't even I can't even pretend to be anti-electoral in this sense because it's going to be so direct in so many little ways. I kept reiterating, and people get mad at me where they're like, "Oh, well, isn't it great that he's at least putting the name of socialism out there?" I'm like, well, this isn't socialist. None of this is socialism. And it's I have to clarify. It's this is at best a social. He's just running some I kept saying good municipal policies.
It's all rebranding. That's all it is. It's just a branding exercise. I mean, the joke of having all these options, right? The luxury of the United States, they have two capitalist parties, right? All that stuff is very true. It's all about branding. I mean, Glenn Ford talked about this, the great late Glenn Ford, Black Agenda Report, where they're able to be the more efficient evil because we do give them grace, right? Because they're not abhorrent monsters that we have to turn away from or immediately recognize as white supremacists, but they uphold white supremacy. They uphold the status quo. Kwame Ture told us about, the pitfalls of liberalism, and these are the people that we have to recognize are our enemies, and they already chose a side. Why are we pretending otherwise, right? But again, it's all marketing. It's all to make us more comfortable and think that we're progressing somewhere, that we're moving forward, right? That we're somehow, we haven't claimed victory, but we're winning breadcrumbs. But where are those breadcrumbs leading us to?
Americans have gotten so used to the government being subservient to oligarchs and the rich that we've somehow been convinced that the government serving regular people directly is socialism. Rent freezes and affordability isn't socialism, it's regulation of what is still very much a free market. The only seemingly socialist plans Mamdani has are the city bus and grocery programs that he's hoping to have.
To that end, you've proposed city-run grocery stores, fare-free public transit.
A network of municipal-run grocery stores, one in each borough, so 5 in total, would cost the city $60 million. The city is already set to spend more than $140 million subsidizing corporate supermarket chains without any guarantee of affordability from that subsidy.
And if we're realistic, those are probably two plans that are more likely to fail than his others. This is a really important thing for leftists of any ilk to keep in mind, as it represents an attack on the left from both sides. On the more obvious end, if Mamdani fails, or to be realistic, whenever he does inevitably fail at something, it will be presented in the cultural zeitgeist as a failure of leftist ideology as a whole, regardless of what favor of left you abide by. We're all just being represented by Mamdani on the main stage right now. Whatever he does is a reflection on us. It's hard enough to have folks differentiate the left from liberals. Now that someone is ostensibly a leftist is in office, that differentiation is going to be even harder for people. However, more insidiously is the fact that Mamdani represents the left while not actually needing to govern as a socialist or Marxist, etc. This gives Mamdani a lot of power that can be used to ultimately further marginalize actual leftist ideology in this country, whether accidentally or purposely. For example, among many red flags that have popped up around him thus far, the biggest has been his capitulation to the NYPD.
Police have a critical role to play in creating public safety.
And the maintenance of Jessica Tisch, who was an open Zionist and has Zionist ties as a chief of police. Now, I don't personally reasonably expect, based on the reality of the situation, that Mamdani is going to purge the entire New York government of Zionist elements in a city like New York. That's just not a realistic outcome. But this particular role is something he could have had more control over, and his decision not to remove her is concerning. Also, while the NYPD is incredibly powerful, I don't think he had to apologize to him on the way to winning the election. I don't think it was necessary.
My statements in 2020 were ones made amidst a frustration that many New Yorkers held at the murder of George Floyd. The campaign that I am asking New Yorkers to consider is one that has been clear on its public safety approach. It's one that speaks about a desire to work with police officers.
And then on top of this, there's rumors about him and AOC holding back other progressive candidates, among other things. Coming back after the fact here to say that this was not a rumor, this ended up being actual fact. While it was unlikely that Osei would have ever beat Jeffries, it still kind of shows Mamdani to be more of a politician than any type of revolutionary. I didn't look into all the details, and he has since tried to plead his case as to why he thinks that was a good idea. I don't really feel him on this explanation, but at the end of the day, it's him being a politician, and that's kind of the whole point I'm trying to make here. This is important to keep in mind because Mamdani is legitimately a paradox. He represents both a huge win for the left and in the world of electoralism, but that fundamentally is not necessarily a win. He also presents a proof of concept on electoral politics, having the capacity to shift toward populist, anti-capitalist, and pro-working class centered appeals. And as flawed as it may be, reintroducing the concept of socialism to public discourse at a large scale is a huge deal and would be a big benefit to the actual people of New York that would benefit from his policies. As I've spoken to in a few other election-centered videos this year, the left is simultaneously way far behind in our power in this country while also being more visible, more organized, and more powerful than we've ever been since probably the 70s. Nixon, COINTELPRO, J. Edgar Hoover, and the Cold War put the American left on life support by the mid-70s, and Reagan finished the job by the early 80s and put into motion a generation of misinformation, counterinsurgency, and a distorted history to ensure that many Americans would always perceive anything left of liberalism as evil or foolish, to the point where I assure you there will be people in the comments saying stuff like, how are you a socialist yet you make money on YouTube? Please, they're coming.
Stay with me now.
They probably didn't even get to this point. They're going to be there. Ironically, I think the wave of Obama and his subsequent failures sparked a few embers for those like myself who were left inclined but didn't really have the baseline knowledge to understand the philosophies behind the left to pursue that and
go deeper.
And that wave that's been going on for a good decade plus now has resulted in 2 socialist mayors in America. Take that for what you will, but the fact that I can joke about this, about the predictable, uneducated responses from people about socialism, is indicative of a broader culture of movement than it was just a few years ago. A lot of that comes from social media, but it's bleeding into normie media and now legitimately into governance. But it is moving, and not just online, in real life. But understand, Mamdani doesn't get credit for that. You do. But that's also the thing we have to guard from. We have to resist the stand moment that is developing behind him. We have to resist stand culture in general, but that's another video. And the thing that makes me realize that this is very much possible is that I chose my guests for this video representing what I thought were different views of Mamdani because I thought they would be more different. But I was very pleasantly surprised to see that they weren't as different as I had initially thought. We are not nearly as polarized among the left as we often tend to think we are. Contradictions within the political reality we're in, where we don't have to have the, leftist infighting TM over stuff that is obviously true in two senses.
Yeah.
And so like,
even I had moments like this where I'll think about like someone be like, oh, okay, like it's fine to critique Zohran Mamdani. And then the moment someone does critique Zohran Mamdani, they're like, how? I do feel that like the TM leftist infighting is kind of a necessity. It's like part of how it functions is this like consistent critique. As long as it doesn't become a thing that like bogs you down from doing action, like it's good to sit here in all of this like contradiction. And I think that like, yeah, I find it a lot of these platform issues, a lot of these things, I don't think he's selling a river, but you can also acknowledge the fact that like, yeah, there's these parts where he's clearly doing the politician bit. He has good intentions. The buses might happen. You can watch the way that he's code switched about Israel. You can watch the way that he's code switched about safety. Like you can see it all in there. And it's like,
we're looking at a Democratic Party who just capitulated to Donald Trump and his shutdown. And I grew up on welfare. I grew up on WIC and all these things. Like that was my childhood. That's what we needed to live. This isn't something that I read in a book. This isn't something that I hear secondhand. This was my childhood. I don't really talk about my life like that because while I know that a lot of people hearing of it would either relate to it or won't be able to relate to it, I still think that I was beyond privilege. And yet I'm still working class. I'm still crazy in debt, student loans, all these things. Right? Living paycheck to paycheck, like literally living paycheck to paycheck. And because of that, not in spite of it, but because of that, I know that we need to do more than what the Democratic Party is providing and what DSA is attempting to sell us. Because yes, you're right. I want Mamdani's platform, his agenda to be completed to the fullest. It's not. We all know this. It's not. Let's stop lying to ourselves. But even though crumbs will benefit people, in situations that I grew up in, situations that I'm still sort of in, to be honest with you, as uncomfortable as it makes me to this day, the issue is that this is a snake oil salesman. The problem isn't what he's, pitching, it's him, right? And what he represents. And the allure of saying, hey, we got the crumbs. Crumbs, most often than not, crumbs that radicals, communists, socialists, anarchists died for.
Everyone I talk to recognized the value of his platform and the value of what he wants to accomplish in New York for New Yorkers and the working class. They recognize the need to hold him accountable and be critical of the gap between where he is and where we actually want to go. And they're all actively doing real life work. Because Mamdani is a paradox, we have to be paradoxical too. We have to have the capacity to see the limitations in his wave, but also root for the results he's seeking that benefit the people. We have to both use his branding as an opportunity to introduce leftist politics to more people as we chip away at 50 years of misinformation, but also guard against him and or the Democratic Party co-opting leftist ideology to recuperate it into the status quo. Again, never forget that after the grand uprisings of 2020, after people marched and burned down stores and we shouted, defund the police, they actually increased police funding in cities across the country, mostly Democratic cities, including the former Democratic president. So yes, once again, what I'm getting at is that we have to learn from the mistakes people my age and older made with Barack Obama. And with that, I have just 3 more major keys that I want to present to you all. Number 1, do not give Mamdani a pass because he's dealing with overt racism from Democrats and Republicans. Everybody's being really racist to Mamdani right now, including black people. Acknowledging that this will happen and that it will be blatant and ridiculous along with covert and dog whistling, that is something we should do. We must and should contend with this when it's encountered. Still, it's important not to allow the fact that Mamdani is going to face racism to lower your standards on what should be expected of his position. This was a grievous mistake made with Obama. When Barack Obama became president and really triggered the beginnings of what would eventually become Trumpism, I think a lot of black folks who should have known better turned off their critical faculties to the point that we gave him way too much grace. By the end of his presidency, black people were supporting the war in Iraq. It was a complete failure on so many levels. And the reason we failed to address it is because while he was in office, he was constantly being bombarded with gross racist ridicule. It seemed wrong under the circumstances to criticize him at the same time. It's the epitome of the failure of identity politics as a core aspect of one's political analysis. So be better here. Know that Mamdani will be subject to constant racism from here on, but also don't allow that to distract you from being critical when he earns that criticism. Again, we will have to engage with two truths at once. 2, pay attention to whom he empowers and where he compromises and how he compromises. We already have Tish as one red flag. There will probably be others. We need to be ready and on his head each time we see one. In the same vein, to give credit where credit is due, Mamdani also appointed Dr. Derek Hamilton to his Transition Committee on Economic Development and Workforce Development. I'll link the video that Dr. Jared Ball made about it already, but to point out why this is kind of a cool thing, Dr. Derek Hamilton wrote the intro to Dr. Ball's book, The Myth of Black Buying Power, which is one of the more important books I think a lot of black folks need to read, which seeks to help dispel the ideology that buying power and black excellence and black millionaires and billionaires is what black people need to save themselves.
I'd love for us to get a conversation.
I'd love to. Oh, thank you.
That is a philosophy that is very dominant and preeminent in a lot of black political spaces that needs to be done away with. And having someone who is amenable to that belief system be put in such an important role is probably the most radical thing he's done so far. Which I want to be clear, doesn't mean there's nothing to worry about. It just means that we need to continue to be critical and paying attention to everything that he's doing with the power that he's been imbued with. As I said with Obama, he purposely began to run to a centrist neoliberal position pretty much the day after he came into power. And it should have been clear as day that that's where things would go from there on. But we didn't want to hear it. We wanted the imagination that we had created for ourselves that he ran on. Further, the biggest failure of Obama was not going far enough on the handful of populist leftist things that he ran on. For example, he didn't go far enough in the Affordable Health Care Act when he had the power to do so. Obama had a filibuster-proof majority for a calendar year, but didn't get the ACA done until a few months after that filibuster-proof status was gone. And he had started capitulating on a real universal health care plan before then. What we ended up with was, by Obama's words, based on the Republican healthcare plan, first introduced ironically by Mitt Romney a few years prior. And this shows that the status quo, the Republicans and the Democrats have this trick that they will definitely use with Mamdani, where Mamdani will start with a radical position and then move it further to the center, but still present it as a radical position. And then it will happen. It will be very much a status quo position, but the people will be saying and thinking that, oh, this was some type of radical accomplishment when it really wasn't. All that plus that dumbass beer summit he did in his first 2 years as president.
Tonight, a few guys are in Washington, D.C. having a cold one. They just happen to be a Harvard professor, a police officer from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the President of the United States.
All that happened, you get the point. What we not gonna do is allow Mamdani to use the excuse, I need to govern to the center or I won't get a second term. No. If he doesn't clearly fight for the promises he made during the campaign without turning them into moderate centrist reforms on the status quo, then he shouldn't get a second term. Period. End of conversation. I don't expect Mamdani to accomplish everything perfectly, but I do expect what is accomplished to legitimately help the working class people of New York. Lastly, and I'm just repeating myself here, but I can't drive this home enough, remember that the people made Mamdani and not vice versa. For everyone who rolled for Mamdani, organized around his campaign, and was inspired by his win, congratulations, you completed the tutorial section of the game. The real game starts now. I guarantee, especially in a city like New York, there's plenty more that you can do. It is so important that we do not slink off to the background after this political win, expecting Mamdani to just do everything we have in our imagination without being there to pressure him, hold him accountable, and create the environment for his platform to be viable. It's important for people to have a community and coalition powerful enough to be held accountable to. If it's just tweets and video essays, it's not going to amount to much. One thing I've been repeating a lot lately that I have to credit Dr. Jared Ball for is the fact that it's the people who make political leaders and the political environment of any time possible. I've done videos about the flawed politics of folks like Beyonce or Kendrick Lamar, etc., and how as much as we want them to be these radical political artists, they very much play things pretty safe. And that's because as a people, black and otherwise, we haven't created the environment of struggle that influences artists and leaders to be beholden to what we really desire. When we go back and look at the 60s and 70s and praise people like Harry Belafonte, James Baldwin, Nina Simone, Sidney Poitier, and many others who were pushing a truly radical pro-black agenda in the mainstream media in the 60s, understand that's because the culture at the time demanded it almost in unison. We had the power in our approval and dollars to hold them to account, and we still have that now. So if you were active, stay active. If you weren't active, get active. If getting active isn't easy, consider other ways you can still contribute. And that brings me back to my folks here in Buffalo. These folks from Lola just started something and began serving their community because they had a vision for trying to do more than just go to protests and pout about it on Twitter. And in the process of doing real work, they encountered the fact that Buffalo, New York is trying to be the site of yet another Cop City project.
We kept talking and we were just like, we're tired of screaming outside of City Hall where people are not hearing us. Let's go inside. So we worked on a ceasefire resolution to try and put more attention on it and to get politicians who will most likely not speak out when it comes to, Israel as a whole. Right. We didn't got to get into it. You already know, you can't say nothing about Israel. So we were trying to challenge that. We put in a ceasefire resolution. We started to get a lot of movement and stuff around that. And ultimately it did raise awareness, but it didn't get, to the point that we wanted it to get. So we found out almost by accident about how they're planning to build a police training facility in Buffalo. And immediately we were just like, we see how it's related to Palestine. We see how state violence is just a weapon to keep people down globally all the time. And this is just the example of it in Buffalo.
As some of you know, there was a huge fight to stop Cop City in Atlanta. And while it was unsuccessful, it was still part of a bigger wave of leftist activity in the city that also inspired the country and the world in general. And understand they're trying to build cop cities everywhere, and these battles to stop them are hard and costly, but they have probably one of the best opportunities to win their fight due to the relative weakness of Buffalo's city purses and the fact that they have already found legal flaws in the process and development of their cop city plan.
I'm gonna say that we've also have been inspired by Atlanta Cop City. We've also tried different tactics that y'all have done over there in Atlanta too. We did a petition. Common Council didn't care. So we always knew that a lawsuit was possible and kept that in our back pocket. Because we just knew that in the process of trying to rush to build this facility, that the city was going to make mistakes, like our elected officials usually do. So it's something that, we kept in mind. The grounds that we are suing on the grounds that neighbors in the area where they're trying to build the facility would be, suing on are based on the environmental impact. The city did do an environmental impact study, but there were plenty of flaws as we suspected. So that will be what the grounds of the lawsuit would be on, considering neighbors in the area would be most impacted, whether it be through lead poisoning or different chemicals in the area that will come into the community because of a training facility.
So Lola is looking to do a funding drive to pay for legal action to sue the city of Buffalo in this issue and do mutual aid directly within their community as a form of growing their organization. Remember that this is where the whole socialist mayor phenomenon low-key started a few years ago by a black woman. It would kind of be fitting that some other black women were able to claim this victory as well, and you can help contribute to that. Please see info for their project in the description and support as much as you can. And as usual in these types of political videos, please, as wisely as possible, use the comment section as a place to direct people to organizing opportunities. No start is too small. In my opinion, if you're just getting out there, it's not like it'll be a magical fix, but nothing gets fixed by just watching video. That said, if you do want to help grow the channel, do all the things the algorithm likes, leave a comment, a like, share this with others. And if you're really dedicated, join the Patreon. That's pretty much all I got for the day. No other ad reads. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.